This is the shoe that thinks it's fast. This is the shoe that thinks it's a spike. Is it? Let's put it to the test. The Antepes Muscle Runner. The desire to be fast is very much in the shoe's name. Antepes is the Latin for forefoot, and of course this shoe is designed to produce a forefoot strike. That's myself, Leigh and Abraham from my sprinting and jumping training group, have been putting these shoes to the test.
They just put me in a really nice position. It makes me be able to run for once.
They're a great intermediate shoe between your spikes and training shoes. We're doing lots of speed work, downhill runs on concrete where you couldn't wear your spikes obviously, lots of fast movement drills, and Abraham, for example, has even been jumping in them, so we've really put them to the test. The shoes have a negative heel gain of 8 to 10 millimeters depending on the size, so this will pitch your foot forwards, unlike a traditional training shoe which is much flatter. They also have a dual density carbon fibre plate in the forefoot, which obviously improves toe off. At the heel, they have patented Heel X technology, which is designed to protect the Achilles tendon and grip the heel strongly. The shoe is wider in the toe box. I've had no problems with foot movement at the front, and narrows towards the rear. Now, for some that may be an issue, of which I'll say more of later. I'll put the full technical specs of the shoe up on screen now so that you can really digest what innovations are inbuilt into the Antepes. Forefoot striking is much more efficient for all speeds of running, whether you're a sprinter somewhat obviously, and also for a distance runner. Pitching the foot forwards makes you run more effectively, gets more return from the track surface or the road surface. The shoes are actually designed to help you forefoot strike. In fact, the shoe's innovator designed them specifically for that purpose, as he had developed a heel spur and couldn't run in normal trainers. Okay, so how did I get on with the Antepes? Well, I trialled them on a number of surfaces and across a number of training sessions. I've used them on the track, I've used them on roads, done some hill runs, and I've even tried them out on some hard compacted trail. Basically, I was thinking about all the scenarios in which a sprinter, jumper, hurdler might want to put the Antepes into use. So let's start off with my reflections on using them on the road, as I think that's a very strong area for the Antepes. Leigh and Abraham, as you'll see on screen now, have been utilising them a lot when we've been doing downhill runs and drills. You wouldn't obviously be able to use your spikes in such situations, and therefore having a shoe that's similar to a spike, very light, throws you forwards, is going to increase speed potential. When I ran in them, I found that you get a reaction from the sole, the forefoot, as you push down into it. The carbon fibre plates push you out of the toe off. That can be a little bit disconcerting initially, and to me, the more you put force down into the road surface, track surface, the greater the return is. Can the shoes improve your speed endurance? Well, I was doing a series of 80-metre runs building up to 90% on a slight incline, and I was beginning to slow down over the last 10 to 15 metres after building up to about 90%, as I've indicated. I actually found it hard to slow down because the shoes continue to want to push you forwards. If you're doing in longer intervals, for example in spikes, you can drop back onto your heels in consequence, but the muscle runners keep that momentum going forwards. So if you can keep the turnover going, you can actually maintain your speed better in them, which for training on the roads is going to be a great benefit, because you're going to increase your velocity across the run, obviously subject to your own fitness. Okay, moving on to track workouts. I found the toe off was slightly softer on the synthetic running track, and that might be because the track surface that I utilised was relatively soft. But you do get a strong sensation of push. However, for me, the road gave a faster energy return. As you can see, I also tested the Antepes on bend runs, accelerations of about 60 metres. I utilised lanes 7 and 8, and even though the shoes are pretty stiff, straight line, and are built on that forward last, that linear last, you can actually run bends in them. They won't rotate quite the same as a normal sprint spike, for example, but if you had to do 200 repetitions, for example, in them, you could. Now, what about sprint drills? Because of that negative gain between the forefoot and the heel, it's quite difficult to hold your balance, as you can see from me attempting to do some cycling drills on the spot in the Antepes. You've got to kind of put your weight back in order to keep a balanced position. You could try to do it more forefoot, but it's quite difficult. That could have a conditioning benefit, but that's something that I wanted to point out. In terms of more dynamic moving forwards drills, such as leg cycling drills and scissor bounds and skipping drills, the shoes do push you onto your forefoot, and that's a good thing. With the skipping drills, however, which would normally result in a heel led to flat contact, you're actually going to strike forefoot, and I found that the heel did not touch the ground, and that consequently gave me a quicker transition into the next skip. I had to think about this after the session, and I thought from a conditioning of the calf muscles, that's going to be very beneficial for sprinting and jumping. The soleus and gastrocnemius are crucial in terms of the stance phase in stopping the whole body collapsing on foot strike. So skipping drills in the Antepes could bolster lower leg musculature in order to strengthen and create a greater power return through the foot and ankle complex, calf complex. And what about that off-road usage that I mentioned earlier? Well, I did some runs on this particular trail, and it was slightly undulating, had quite a lot of stones in it, but was rock hard. Potentially, you do get thrown side to side a little bit more than you would do in a thinner soled training shoe, for example, where you'd get greater proprioception and be able to feel the ground potentially more through the forefoot. However, you can do your intervals, some sprinting on off-road trails should you want to, and I'm assuming that this would enable distance runners to also utilise them on firm trails for faster runs as well. The shoes produce greater vertical velocity. Now that vertical velocity, as with all kind of sprinting and running at all speeds, needs to be converted into horizontal velocity, and that's done by your hip movement, the pull of the heel. So you've got to work with the shoes to generate that greater horizontal velocity from what appears to be an increased vertical velocity. When I was running on the track surface, I felt a slight delay in energy return compared to the road surface. Now that could be myself, as I was really thinking about the shoes and trying to get a real feel for the energy return capabilities of the Antepes. But there did seem to be a slight delay on the foot strike where the track compressed, the shoe then compressed, and then the energy was returned. Now, in a spike where you've got less forefoot cushioning and maybe just a carbon fibre plate, you're going to probably get a greater and immediate return of energy. With the muscle runners, because of the thickness, as I've said, potentially that is why you're getting greater compression. Now, much will depend on how much force you're putting down into the track surface, of course, or the road surface in terms of energy return. Also, getting used to a carbon fibre forefoot plate in a training shoe is something that many of us will need to get used to. After the first few sessions, my calves felt tired for about an hour or so afterwards, but then that diminished, and in fact I ran faster than them 3 days in a row. Now that might be because I'm a sprinter jumper still and have lower leg muscles that are specifically conditioned to forefoot striking. I'd imagine that if you're not, then you're going to have some issues with the calf muscles being tighter and a little bit sorer because you're going to be pitched forward. You'll need to break the shoes in a little bit. I mentioned earlier about the HeelX technology, that narrowness at the back of the shoe. Well, after my first couple of sessions, I had some blisters developing on my heels, and therefore you need to be mindful. I did wear them without socks on one session, and that did make the situation worse. So subsequently I made sure I wore socks. However, potentially they can rub in the heel area, so do be mindful of that. The wings at the back of the shoes also caused some issues for Abraham. Myself, it wasn't a problem, but do be mindful of that tightness in the heel area. I would thoroughly recommend the Antepes Muscle Runners for sprinters, jumpers and hurdlers. as an adjunct to your sprint spikes as an intermediary step. You can utilise them for lots of preparatory work in your training sessions where you're drilling, where you wouldn't want to wear spikes, for example. You can utilise them on the roads for sprinting and potentially for improving your speed and sprint endurance. And they will also improve potentially your form as they throw you up and get you into better positions knee lift wise. Having said that though, you do need to make sure that you convert the vertical into horizontal. They'll also strengthen your calf muscles as well, which is all positive. There's lots of great information on the Antepes website. Also check out Cody Athlete X's YouTube video for more information and a slightly different perspective from my one. Check out the link in the video description for purchasing information on Antepes.